Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the visit by Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry to the U.S., where he met with the Secretary of Foreign Affairs in the U.S., Rex Tillerson, along with a lot of top U.S. diplomats. We're going to be talking about the future of the Egyptian-U.S. relations, the new strategies of the U.S. relations regarding the Middle East and the Palestinian-Israeli file. But before we do that, we're going to be trying to focus a little bit on President Sisi actually meeting today with the French Minister of Defense, Le Drian, in Egypt, and he was awarded the highest medal from the state. And we're joined now over the phone by Ambassador Nabil Bedr, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Bedr, can you hear us? Ambassador Bedr, can you hear us, sir? Ambassador Bedr.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. Ambassador, now this visit by the Defense Minister, the French Defense Minister, meeting President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, and the President actually awarded Le Drian the highest medal, state medal, for enhancing the military cooperation between Egypt and France. What is the significance of actually the President awarding him the highest medal of the state?
Well, I think it's a high reward because the minister has been effective, cooperative, and as a matter of fact, throughout our strategic relationship with France, has done what she could to accelerate the delivery of requirements of the Egyptian Army, Egyptian Navy, and Egyptian aviation as well. The second message, which I think is equally very important, is that Egypt not only decides, but actually takes into effect that it diversifies the sources of its armaments. So far, it has bought arms from more than one source, and that's a part of a basic and strong conviction and strategy observed by Egypt, and will be observed in the coming phases as well. It's a message to everybody. We are friends, we have strategic friends, we have common interests as well. At the same time, we think that diversification of the sources of armaments is a policy which we have learned is worth pursuing and is actually more competent and effective to meet our needs as well.
Yes.
The third thing is, of course, that throughout the strategic relationship with France, there is a common appreciation of the importance of meeting the Egyptian requisites as well. In other words, a country does not sell armaments just because it's a commercial deal, but because there are relationships based on conviction of the effect and the efficient use of such armaments, and as well that country is well reputed, that it's not aggressive, is not going to use that against the best interests of the region, of the countries concerned, or as a matter of fact, towards world policies, generally speaking.
Ambassador Bedr, now we know that the Egyptian-French relations are quite strong, but what about the future of these relationships in light of the upcoming presidential elections that will be taking place in France? Can we expect any sort of change? Can it be strengthened even more? Do we not know exactly the policies that a future French president could have and his relationship with Egypt?
This question is generally posed as a matter of speculation, whether the elections take place in France or in other countries as well. In other words, people prefer to issue the judgments towards a party with whom they have made business, conducted transactions, and settled things. As things are, if you look at the basic strategic interests, common interests between Egypt and France, I think they are stable. I do not speculate under the existing conditions changes that might affect that in a way which could change the decision to continue that effective military cooperation. If you look at the political sector, we have stable relationships. So they have France recognizing the Egyptian role and its importance in this part of the world, cooperating with us against terrorism as well. Think that the extension of the Egyptian beneficial effect, if I might put it that way, towards Africa, the Middle East, and its Arab neighbors is useful towards the French relationship, does not contradict it, and at the same time does not affect negatively in a way which could harm that.
Yes.
France, of course, is keen to extend its relationship with other countries of the area, and this is not against Egyptian interests as well. Of course, there is a basic issue here, and we might point out that France has been trying to play a role, an effective and a good one, in terms of moving forward the Palestinian issue, which has suffered from a stale situation in the last years. You know, the French position towards organizing that international conference and pushing things forward in spite of the Israeli objection.
Yes.
That in itself is an effective factor towards solidifying the sort of political cooperation that exists between the two countries. Economically as well, I think we are open for French investments. There is no contradiction here. And I think France itself does encourage that sort of commercial transactions. We might find better ways and means of doing that.
Yes.
Militarily, as we have noted, well, things are moving ahead and in the right direction.
Mr. Ambassador, one final question regarding a local development in Egypt now. There was a conference under the auspices of President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi held under the title of Freedom and Citizenship. And it was attended by Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmad al-Tayyib, and also Pope Theodorus II, talking about religious coexistence and the religious dialogue here in Egypt and within the region. How far do you feel the efforts of the Egyptian government and both the Al-Azhar and the Egyptian church in actually influencing a lot of good values to the coexisting nature in Egypt?
I think this is highly appreciated in France as well. One of the major problems on the European soil today and worldwide is, as a matter of fact, the way terrorism has spread and the way terrorism sometimes, and in all cases, tries to align itself with a religious false surface. And regrettably, in that case, it's Islam. Now, there are things which have been marked out and which have been actually an object for a positive observation by many political and cultural observers in Europe and sometimes in the United States, which is that Egypt is now pioneering a serious effort to push forward significant reform in the religious area. By reform, I do not mean any change in religion itself. That the religion itself is of course valid and eternal. But what I mean is the wrong interpretations, the cultural unfavorable surroundings, and the faulty education, upbringing, and certainly the mistakes which jeopardize human rights under different appellations that in certain cases try to align themselves with that sort of ill interpretation of religion, and in certain cases go back to a stark fight against citizenship in which Egypt believes, certainly, and practices as well. And through persecution of minorities, whether these be Christian, Jewish, or whatever. Now, the Egyptian position so far is, of course, that this is all faulty, unacceptable, and that religion is fed, respectable for all times, and that no change in a wrong way is accepted. And accordingly, that's pioneered that sort of reform and that sort of movement against the background which has been regrettably stale in the last decade. And there is a strong Egyptian conviction which is also accepted and appreciated that if you want to find terrorists, it's not only the military way, it's the cultural way as well.
Yes. Ambassador Nabil Badr, unfortunately, we have to cut you off here. Ambassador Nabil Badr, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, now to focus on our topic of discussion, let's check out this report regarding Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry continuing his visit to the US, meeting a lot of top US diplomats and officials, and we'll be right back to discuss it with our distinguished guests.
States, which will be the fine Egyptian president in years. Shoukry is also expected to discuss US-Egyptian relations, counter-terrorism and efforts to relaunch the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Ahead of the visit, Shoukry said US-Egypt relations are on the threshold of a new phase after the election of Trump. Speaking to the Parliament's Foreign Relations Committee, the top diplomat said Egypt has dealt over the past 4 decades with successive American administrations through a strategic relationship based on mutual interest and benefit. He stressed there's been many developments during the last 6 years, reiterating that Egypt's need to focus on Arab and national security issues in the current critical stage. He also stressed the significance of public diplomacy to support Egypt's foreign relations and praised the heightened awareness of the Egyptian people. He said the Egyptian people have been able to run the fray amid the challenges and developments in the region during the last 6 years, which climaxed with the revolution of June the 30th. The minister said he looks forward to achieving the aspirations of the Egyptian people, praising the diverse representation of society in the current House of Representatives. Shoukry concluded by mentioning Egypt faces many challenges, both politically and economically, after the Arab revolutions, which has caused significant changes in the region.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and starting off our discussion, let me first welcome our distinguished guest, Ambassador Hamdy Saleh, former Assistant Foreign Minister, and we're also joined by Dr. Mohammed Halim, the political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Delighted.
Ambassador Saleh, first of all, we've seen many visits by the Foreign Minister, Sameh Shoukry, to the US, even before Donald Trump was inaugurated as a president, and now we're seeing this visit preparing for the upcoming soon visit by President Sisi to Washington. Now, Foreign Minister Shoukry met with the U.S. Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. What is the importance or the significance of such a visit now as opposed to all the visits that have been done over the past couple of months?
Let me first talk about the context where, how our relations with the United States is moving. To start with, as you mentioned in your report and in the comments before, you have seen several Western countries coming to visit Egypt. Britain, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Merkel is coming in a week, and this is the French the Minister of Defense. So you see the 3 major powers in Europe converging on Cairo for one reason, because they are changing their strategy. They are looking into the pillars of stability in the region, which is Egypt and Jordan, and trying to develop a certain strategy to deal with the major problems facing them in the southern part of the Mediterranean. So in this context, you see also as the same movement in the United States. The new administration, the Trump administration, is also considering making alliance with the 2 major pillars of stability, which is Egypt and Jordan, and to a large, to an extent, the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the Gulf and Emirates and so on. So there is a convergence of factors which are leading towards developing a better relationship between Egypt as a medium-sized country and the Western countries. So Sameh Shoukry goes to Washington at that particular time in this context. This is the traditional visit. Every time the president goes, the foreign minister go to to see the major figures in the administration, to see what are the points of discussion and what are the preparations and so on. So that's a traditional visit. The problem is, to what extent do we know the new administration? This is still a question mark. Because the new administration is still new figures. We don't have enough background about them. Some of them are very, very well known to us, because some of them, like the Secretary of Defense, Mattis, and also the two other people. I think the former national security advisor, but also maybe this national security advisor, the current one. We have some familiarity with them because they were working here in the command as a commander of the American forces in the region. So we have some, but we don't have enough information about Bannon, about the people who are working with Trump in the White House and so on. And to what extent Sameh Shukri or others can really develop relationship and develop good understanding of what these people are thinking about is a question mark. However, it's an important visit. It's a good visit. I hope he can be able to develop some kind of rapport and to develop a context where this, what you call an opening for developing the relationship between Egypt and Washington could develop further. And that needs working from us. And let me emphasize this point, that basically what we are seeing so far is initiatives from the Western countries, from Washington towards us. What are the initiatives we are going to take to deal with this? This is the question mark. And here are the Europeans are coming. Here are the Americans are inviting you, and they are interested.
Yes.
Well, you need to develop a strategy. And now Egypt and Jordan have a responsibility to develop a strategy, particularly with regard to this convergence of factors and the focus on the Middle East as a major area which the world at large is very concerned about, and to present that to the Arab Summit in Jordan in the very near future.
Yes. Well, Dr. Abdul Halim, now, if we look at the performance of the U.S. administration so far since the 20th of January, the inauguration of Donald Trump, basically the highlights were the travel ban against 7 countries. We've seen also Trump calling for building a wall between the States and Mexico, and it had a lot of propaganda against it, a lot of reactions, whether from the people on the streets or from heads of states and leaders of the international community. What sort of vibe or impression do you get from the performance of the U.S. administration up until now?
Right. Well, it seems to be quite, to my own understanding, actually very much promising compared with the previous administration, as being very much represented by Barack Obama, actually. If you compare between both periods and both types of figures that you are dealing with, you may anticipate signs of optimistic future, signs of mutual identification, I would say. Well, to begin with, concerning, the problematic situation of the banned travel for about 7 countries, you are away from it, actually. Egypt has never, ever been actually witnessed or even allocated by Trump's new American administration to be allocated as one of those countries that should be banned, actually. And this is a testimony to the clear fact that we are developing more than one good respect, more than one good identity with each other. Concerning that sort of wall, actually, that is to be erected between Mexico and America as a line of separation, as a line of marginalization, or entailing this away from that. Well, I think that Donald Trump is very much, cunning the way it would seem to be actually from the inauguration speech. If you try to analyze actually his own further steps and his own, suggestive remarks at the very beginning of how we would have to achieve the American dream and how we would have to look on the Americans first, to utilize all the chances actually of finding alternatives and jobs and to solve the problem of Obamacare actually, and to look for their own health and to look for the average of the working class people. We can really anticipate the fact that we are dealing with another type of presidential authority actually entering the White House. Allocating a new type of strategy. I would say that he would seem to be quite away from the world of politics to a great extent. Being a tycoon, being a man that is very much immersed and very much deeply absorbed within the world of money, doing that sort of transactions and businesses on a large scale to the extent of being a tycoon, I would say. But we'd have to remember right from the very beginning that the United States of America could be regarded as a land, as a country of constitution, of an institution, no matter how the sort of the president that is entering the White House would seem to be. No matter how lacking actually the providential political experience that he should be endowed with might be. No matter how alienated actually from the word of war he may appear actually to be. There is something which is very much important within the world of politics, within the United States of America, which is the policymakers actually. In each single conceivable individual respect, in each single individual gesture on the part of Donald Trump, he will be highly educated into the way of doing it. And I think that signs of success would seem to be quite looming large from his own insistence on the sort of achieving the American dream and actually solidifying and assisting the working class people actually. He's trying to harp on the American dream right from the very beginning. And I would say that he was very much, resourceful and very much intelligent enough to the extent that he would allocate the place of the dinner side by side to the statue of Abraham Lincoln, the sort of the man who would, emancipate all the American aspirations that would seem to be quite eager for more. So, I mean, to outward seeming, he would seem to be quite very much aggressive, very much arrogant, very much highly opinionated figure, living in an ivory tower. But after the lapse of 1 month, actually, he's putting what you might call, condescendences, actually. He's trying to put it halfway between these and that. He never says yes, in much the same way that he never says no. He's always between these and that, playing a sort of a highly political game that I would think that we have got something in common with him, actually. Trump, in his own early debates with Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee, a couple of months ago, I think that Mr. Fattah Sisi actually has had a sort of a meeting with him. And he himself, Donald Trump, would ask the chance of meeting Mr. Fattah Sisi, admiring his own way of putting an end for the act of terrorist actions and for fighting terrorism, particularly in northern Sinai. This is very much important. That would give us the impression right from the very beginning that no matter how that sort of policy, no matter how sort of man entering into the White House may seem to be quite, aggressive as it might have to be said, but we have got more than one thing in common with him. And on top of them, I would say that fighting terrorism on a large scale would unify our own goals and our own targets towards one unified aim at the end of the day, which is spreading peace. Particularly when, at one stage in his own inaugurated speech, actually said that we'd like to spread peace here, there, and everywhere, but through power. And I think that he is very much insisting on doing so, and he said that word and he meant it. And he meant what he said, actually. That you will insist on still doing, actually, that sort of spreading peace through power.
Yes. Well, Ambassador Saleh, now, you've mentioned that a lot of international community leaders are actually wanting to get involved with Egypt in many of their political decisions for the future. Now, we know that the political relationships are based on interests and more than sentiment. So, you said that we're gonna have to watch and observe what can Egypt offer in return to these countries. What do you think we can offer? What sort of political equation, what sort of balance can we offer these international superpowers?
Very good point. Let me first comment on the point which you mentioned and our colleague was talking about. The administration of the new administration, President Trump, and his associates, all the people who came with him, they represent a dilemma for most of the Western countries and for us. On one side, they are realistic. They are trying to. They have a strategy to fight terrorism, to fight Daesh, and to really contain Iran, and to do these things. These are very useful for the Middle East at large, because in the final analysis, the Obama administration did not really put the points on the line. It was a little bit passive, and it was semi-neutral. So the things went out of control, and we have all these fire in the region. So the Trump administration is coming with some ideas which are really more realistic. However, on the other side, if you look to all the people who are surrounding Mr. Trump, from Bannon to Courage to whatever, several people, they have so much biased perceptions, not only of Islam, but all of the others, the concept of the others. I don't want to say that some of them are racist, but there are accusations of some of these people and so on. So the dilemma facing us, and the dilemma facing the Europeans as well, is how to really deal with this, how to try to change the atmosphere in Washington to be able to be more realistic, to understand what does it mean, the others. So this ban, for example, which the administration tried to do, was rejected by the court. which is a checks and balance in the American system. So, but on the other hand, you need really to develop also a better way of dialoguing about what is the Islam and what is the terrorism, so to separate these from each other, because there is some confusion of this. Let me come back to the point you mentioned. Basically, what we are witnessing now is that there is a problem in the southern part of the Mediterranean. This problem, which is in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq, and in Yemen, and partially in Lebanon, and so on, this problem is presenting a huge challenge to Europe and to America. The fact that we have billions of people immigrated to Europe as a result of the exodus of Syrians as a result of the tragedy in Syria, that put a tremendous burden on Germany, and tremendous burden on all the other European countries, even the Eastern European. So they are now looking for solutions. What can we do? Because you cannot leave the southern part of the Mediterranean, and they are living in the northern part, on fire and live in peace. So they are trying to develop a strategy. The point is they have to deal with the people who are in the field, on the land. And the only two pillars of stability are Egypt and Jordan at this particular point, in that part, and a little bit further the Gulf and Saudi Arabia. So they are trying to develop a strategy to see what could be done. The Americans are trying to do the same thing. This part of the world is our part of the world, and it's very much important for us to develop a strategy. What should we do? What could be done as an Arab group, and what do we need from them? So instead of waiting for them to develop their own strategy and to try to implement it, to interfere in Libya, to interfere in Syria, we have to develop our own strategy. And I think this is a major responsibility on the Arab summit, which is coming in Jordan. So in the final analysis, all these development, which I see coming from the Western Europe or coming from Washington, has to converge into a better understanding between all of us to what could be done. Because you cannot leave Libya on fire like this. Egypt and Tunis and Algeria are working on this, but we need to move faster. Syria is a major issue, but you cannot leave it to Turkey and Iran and so on. It's amazing. So Yemen, you cannot leave it on fire like this. So you need a strategy, and that's what's needed from Egypt, to develop a better understanding and to develop a strategy to offer ideas and to tell everybody who is coming, here is the role we would like you to play with us. So to contain this fire and to move further into stabilizing the region.
Well, Dr. Abdul Halim, do you feel that the Arab leaders, or mainly let's try and look at Egypt and Jordan, and in anticipation of the upcoming Arab summit, do you feel that the Arab leaders and the Arab states have some sort of an option or a solution to actually solve these crises and try to calm down or resolve the south of the Mediterranean region?
Right. Well, to be honest, the only two sole countries within the Middle East area, actually, that are very much ready, actually, to participate realistically, on realistic grounding outside, are only Egypt on the one hand and then Jordan on the other. That's why you can really find a large number of summits, of meetings, of conferences, actually, among the Arab countries in the Arab League, actually. Every now and again, they would cooperate, they would sit and talk, they would chat, select and reject. They would act and react without reaching to a final testimony to one of the facts that they are discussing on the table, actually. I think that the only significant, actually, role that is to be played significantly and realistically, as much as straightforwardly, is the sort of role that's being played by Egypt, actually, by the interference and the sorts of the threats that our own presidential authority is making every now and again to a large number of European countries. And I think that the final culmination of all these threats will be ended with, the sort of the visit that is to be quite looming large very soon to the United States of America, actually. That is to be prepared by Sabah Shukri. And I think the significance of the sort of visit by our own presidential authority to United States of America since actually 2004 would play such a vital role. And, it would play such, a unifying force to bring all those distracted countries together. It would play, as you might have said, actually, a sort of a very significant step towards the process of solving the Palestinian problem, of sitting and of going actually to El Sukhairat conference, actually to try to put an end for the sort of the Daesh groups here, there and everywhere, and actually to finalize and pacify the sort of the struggling forces between the opposition parties and those governmental forces representing Bashar al-Assad's side. So the importance of the visiting here and the selection actually of Egypt, the selection of the presidential authority on the part of Donald Trump actually of our own Mr. President Fattah al-Sisi is quite significant actually. That would give us the impression, actually here, there and everywhere, the fact that his own extreme sense of belief of the sort of the power that is being vastly used and practiced on a large scale by our own president. This is on one respect. And the other is the importance of Egypt from geographical point of view, from cultural standpoint as well. And I think that the sort of the diversification actually of a large number of weapons, sometimes from Russia, sometimes from America, sometimes from France as well, is a sort of continuation of the links of the chain at the end of the day that would give the impression and strike a very good example actually for the European world as much as to the other countries that might not be quite very much agreeing with the Egyptian concept actually, that we are there and we are gonna to strike an exemplary role actually that is to be very much diversified, very much actually practiced on a large scale.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen the presidency actually strengthening its relations with many European countries, such as Russia, France, Germany. We've also seen Egypt strengthening its relations with Asian superpowers manifested in China and India, for example. And the next step is the U.S. new administration in light of the future visit of President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi to Washington soon. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
The U.S.-Egyptian relationship is deep-rooted in strategic calculation as it makes possible broader peace in the Middle East region. The U.S.-Egyptian relationship has helped Egypt modernize its military and has added weight to its position as a stabilizing regional force. America's support has also strengthened Egypt's economy, as has been true for the past 2 decades. A moderate Egypt is the key to peace and stability in the Middle East. The U.S.-Egyptian relationship has served the two sides well. 2 decades of military cooperation and training have moderated Egypt's military establishment. During the Gulf War, Egypt's support was central to Arab participation in the war against Iraq. These ties remain central to the U.S. ability to project and protect its strategic interests in the world's most volatile region. Washington has lost sight of what the Middle East would look like without a strong U.S.-Egyptian relationship. A nuclear-inclined or armed Egypt ambiguous of the issue of terror, uncertain on peace with Israel, and disinclined to negotiate would drastically recast the management of the Middle East. The U.S. gives Egypt an average of $1.5 billion in military and economic aid every year. U.S.-Egyptian military ties are a key link in the U.S. relationship. More broadly, the U.S.-Egyptian defense relationship sends a signal of domestic moderation and deterrence to the region.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing our discussion now, Ambassador Saleh, you've said that this is part of a visit of, or preparation for a visit of President al-Sisi to Washington. It's not just President Trump meeting the Egyptian president, but also he is meeting a lot of leaders from within the region. Now, how can we actually maximize on such a meeting to actually have a very good, strong jump start within the new U.S. administration and our government?
You put your finger on the right thing. This is a core question. This is a core point. The Americans are developing their own strategy. So in the political level, they are looking to see all the leaders in the region, the major leaders. So already Netanyahu was there, and already King Abdullah was there, and also the President Sisi will be there, and they will meet a couple of others, and also even Erdogan will be in touch and so on. They will develop, based on this, their own strategy for the region, and they already have some outlines for that, which they are going to take it to start even interfering in the Syrian conflict. They will contain Iran. They will try to pull Iraq away from Iran. And then, they even asked the Saudis to send the foreign minister over there, Adil Jubair, to Iraq. So their strategy is already shaping up. So on the political level, there is a conversion of interest between Egypt and the U.S. strategy, and I think that will work anyway. The problem is, how can you make use of this new partnership in the economic field? Because the Trump administration has a very funny thing, which is it is going to cut aid in general from the State Department. They are moving $55 billion from aid and other things to the army to rebuild the American army. So they are not expected to give you more money. But the most important point, they are expected to smile at you, to welcome you, to say we are partners. So it is really up to you as the Egyptian government, at the Egyptian business community, at the Egyptian civil society, to move on, to develop new partnership with the American institutions, and to see to what extent they can benefit from this warm relationship. They have to build a new format of economic cooperation, of what you call joint investment, and so on. The focus here should be that America is very much in need to expand its exports. It is not really coming to try to help you alone. They are trying to help themselves. So you should develop a formula where you bring American companies to work with you in order to export to Africa and to the Middle East. That's the point, and that's the issue, and I think that's what you can work on. Whether Egypt is ready at this particular time with its own institution to do that, that's a question mark. Because for some time in the last 5 years or so, Egypt was very much inward looking, did not do much in the region. It was very much focused on its own problems in Sinai and the economic there and the Muslim Brotherhood and so on. For the time being, you have to open up. You have to really look into your role in the region, which was a little bit diminished. And now you have to look into your role as an economic center. Now there is a major problem for the investment all over the region because people are very concerned about what's happening in the region. You have to establish yourself as a haven for investment and so on. Yani when I was just coming on my way here, people were looking at say, well, most of the touristic sites in the region are now closed. Nobody goes to Beirut, nobody goes to Cairo, nobody goes to Istanbul. Very few. Why? Because of the turbulence in the region. Now it's about time to try to develop a new image and to move into this. So to work hand in hand with the Americans and with the Europeans, since the Europeans are coming to you, to develop that. So that's what I'm pushing for, a new strategy. Don't wait for the other to do the things for you.
Dr. Abdul Halim, do you feel that it would be to actually enhance the Egyptian-US relations, do you feel that we have an upper hand or maybe more to offer economically wise more than political help or a political strengthening between the US and Egypt? Do you feel that with the strong economic inclination of the US administration headed by Donald Trump with a business background, do you feel that Egypt has more to offer economically in the relationship more than politically?
Right, of course. I'm a bit optimistic, actually, of the sort of the status quo, of the sort of relation that might exist in future from political point of view, from strategic point of view, and on a military basis in the meantime. The fact that we have got very deeply rooted ties, actually, with the United States of America that might go perhaps to the 19th century, the second half of the 19th century, that the early time in which the early American consulate was to be established actually in Cairo. And that will give us an impression right from the very beginning that we have got more than one thing in common actually right from the early start, from a political point of view, despite the fact that, you know, the sorts of the relationships between Egypt on the one hand and America on the other, sometimes up, sometimes down, reaching to the culmination of what you might call an absolute fiasco, an absolute sense of failure during the course of the war of the 1967 war, actually after the devastation actually that occurred for an Egyptian land. But immediately after that, actually, you can really anticipate, you know, signs of maturity, signs of success, signs of mutual, you know, identification, signs of, you know, mutual give and take, you know, I mean, helping hand actually, and American aids in the meantime. But I think the most fruitful essence and the most fruitful and the most interesting fact that we might get by the assumption of the new American administration as being represented by Donald Trump is the fact that it would put an end actually for the Muslim Brotherhood, the sort of the nightmarish aspect actually that we have been passing through every now and again. And I think that sort of thing was to be very much influenced by the striking example that has been given by Mr. Fattah al-Sisi actually in collecting and solidifying his own people in the 6th of June actually to put an end for what Donald Trump himself has said at such an early start actually of his own inaugurating speech, to put an end for the Islamist radical groups actually aiming and concentrating and putting actually the zoom of the camera actually on those terrorist acts on the Muslim Brotherhood activities actually. This is, I think, the most fruitful fact, and this is the most fruitful partnership actually that we can really get. But on an economic side, let me say actually that since quite a long period of time, not only Egypt and the Middle East area, But almost all other Arab countries are receiving what you might call great types of grants actually from an American side. This is a fact that we have to live with. And this is sort of, you know, what you might call a status quo that should be repeated here, there, and everywhere. But the sort of the thing that we have to be very much cautious of is the problematic situation actually of the sudden visit and the first inaugurating visit, let me say, of Prime Minister Netanyahu actually to, you know, Washington D.C., to the White House, talking about the two-state solution and the assistance on the part of Donald Trump, the one-state solution. I think that Saleh Shukri's very much symbolic visit actually today, and his own, you know, I mean, communication with Rex Tillerson, actually, the foreign minister on the American side, would be very much significant in clarifying the issue and putting the border lines actually on economic side, on political standpoint, as much as on trying to ease the way and pacify all problematic situations that might face us, and on top of them actually the problematic issue actually of economy.
Yes. Well, Mr. Ambassador, you've mentioned that the U.S. administration is trying to formulate its own strategy after meeting with many of the world leaders. Now, this administration came with a lot of promise of solving the crises within the Middle East. And there was always talk about Egypt helping with the know-how, knowing exactly how to combat terrorism within the region. Now, how do you feel the U.S. administration will deal with actually solving the crises here in the Middle East, and the benchmark that a lot of people evaluate the performance of a U.S. administration has always been the Palestinian-Israeli file? And there's been quite recently talk of a two-state solution. No, we don't like the two-state solution. No, it's the only way to handle it. How do you feel the new U.S. administration would deal with these crises?
You put too many issues in one basket, but let me try to put some outlines for this. Let me say that, you know, my contacts with the Republicans before the election, several Republicans, were very much supportive of Egypt. Particularly the conservative Republicans, ultra-right and the middle right and so on, they were very much, you know, supportive of Sisi, of our system and so on. At the same time, with the Obama administration and the liberals and the Democrats were very critical because of human rights and because of this and this and this. And so, in a sense, Trump election is really a continuation of that line. He came with the concept that, you know, America is under siege. There is so many forces who are coming to really attack America and attack the West. So because of that, he would like to resolve the issues in the Middle East to bring stability to that. That's a main goal which he really announced, and he is going to commit himself to that. The problem is are so complex. You have the Syrian issue, which have so many factors involved. You have the Iraqi issue, which is really a very complicated issue. You have the Libyan. So these three major problems are now at the focus of interest of the American strategy at this particular time. Now, as I said, the problem in the past that Egypt was onward looking in the past 5 years. We were more or less a neutral, you know, in this. It's about time that we develop some ideas. What should we do, and how can we deal with the Europeans and Americans in moving forward to resolve this issue? The major issue for the Trump administration is something which nobody expected, which is Iraq, to pull Iraq away from Iran. And that's why they are working on Abadi and the Prime Minister and so on to try. He told him you have to choose between America and Iran. Trump in his first telephone call. And then they asked Saudi Arabia to step in, and they asked us to step in. We are trying to step in to try to say that you have more friends than Iran. You should not really focus on. But the problem there is that it is so complex because, you know, you have the Shia, and the Shia themselves are fighting each other. The Shia house is divided, and as a result of that, it's not clear picture now what will happen with the fight for Mosul and so on. Also, the interference from Turkey, interference from Iran, and all these things. The second problem is Syria, and the Syrian issue now is moving forward. I think the American strategy is focused on the idea that the Russians should do the job, that they should continue to do the job to really establish certain stability there, to support the regime and so on, and to get some stability over there, and to a large extent, you know, in cooperation with Turkey. But to what extent the Arab role will be there, you know, also that's another question which should be presented to the American administration, because this would be very helpful, because we have a problem in Syria that about 11 million people immigrated from Syria in exodus. That's a huge thing. That's even more than Palestine itself. So you have to work on this to find out how can we resettle these people and to re-establish certain level of stability to bring this back into reality. Then you have Libya, and Libya also is on fire. We are working on this, but you know, you need a very firm stand by Europeans and Americanos to try to resolve the issue in Libya. Otherwise, weapons are coming to Libya from Qatar, from Turkey, from everywhere, and that's really creating more fire. So, in a sense, these three issues are our issues. It is not American issues. It's really primary our land, and we have to have a strategy for this. That's why I'm really recommending that whether Mr. Shukri or the others or visiting or not visiting, the issue is what you are developing as a strategy, not the issue just to meet with the people and to hear them. You can exchange notes and so on, but in the final list you have to develop certain
Well, what about the Palestinian-Israeli file?
Then I come to the Palestinian issue. It's very amazing that Trump, who has his daughter became Jewish, and he's very connected to the Jewish groups, and even he's a close friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, is committed to resolving the Palestinian issue. This is really an amazing, and this is by itself is calling for optimism, like what my colleague here was saying. You have to be optimistic. He also asked his son-in-law, the husband of Ivanica, to work on this, which is very close to him, and he is Jewish. The point is whether it's a one-state solution, two-state solution, whatever, but there is a serious effort to move forward. And it's about time also that the Palestinians bring their house in order and to say what they wanted. But not to leave others to say everything and they wait for them. So I think there is an opportunity, a window of opportunity for the Palestinian issue to move a little bit forward. But also that needs to be examining from the Arab side, not just to have slogans, no, it's only two solution. That's not the issue. The issue how to get your rights and how to move forward. And I think, as I said, we are at an important juncture, because all these forces are converging to try to say, well, no, we cannot leave the Middle East on fire like this. It will catch with us. So they are all interested to resolve issues. If you can push it also in the Palestinian issue, I think you can reach a certain solution. But also, you have another golden opportunity with this Arab League conference.
Yes.
The last Arab League conference was really in a bad shape, in Mauritania, but this is a good opportunity.
Yes. Dr. Abdul Halim, one final question because we're running out of time. Now, going back to the Egyptian-US relations, now Egypt has really good relations with countries such as Russia, such as China. Do you think, will this be in our favor in strengthening our relationship with the US? Notably, we understand that the relationship between the US and Russia is sometimes up, sometimes down. With China, it's a little bit frosty as well. Do you feel that Egypt having strong relations with these superpowers, does that work in our favor when we are actually talking about a lot of cooperation with the US, or will that be a little bit against us?
Yeah, well, I think that it wouldn't detract from the words of Egypt actually to be on the straightforward line towards the fortification of military weapons actually. And in the meantime, I wouldn't say that it would seem to be quite a sort of hindrance, actually, or a sort of blockage, actually, in our own way of solidifying and of diversifying all our own sources of weapons, actually. The fact that we have got, as I've just said at the very beginning, that we have got those very much deeply rooted historical ties with America, from economic point of view, from military, strategic, political, etc., till the very end. And much the same way that before the era of Mohammed Anwar Sadat, the Soviet Union was the best among the rest, was one of the most, interesting and very much dear and very much near superpowers actually to Egypt. And again, actually, I think that there is no harm in any conceivable respect that Egypt would utilize each sort of single individual chance at its own disposal to unify its own army, to diversify its own types of weapons, either from the East or from the West, represented by America and Russia, I would have said.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's still a lot of developments between the Egyptian and US relations that will be taking place within next couple of months in light of the future visit of President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi to meet President Donald Trump in Washington. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. Mohammed Al-Halim, the political analyst. I'd also like to thank very much Ambassador Hamdy Saleh, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.